Hello, great to see you.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Oh, thanks for joining us. Now, to start with, for people watching who haven't seen it yet, Laws of Motion is our latest addition to Life Interrupted, our online exhibition, and it takes the form of a video dance and a written essay. So, Adolfo, could you start by telling us a bit about how your collaboration with Mod began and some of the key concepts behind this new work?
Sure. The funny thing is that it all began with a message that had gone astray into the junk folder. And I found it magically and messaged back, replied to the person who contacted me, Rachel, whom I'd previously worked with in our younger lives as younger people, basically children. And yeah, said, yes, I'd be interested to do a collaboration with Mod. So initially it was conceived of as a stream performance, just, one of those things where people come together. And obviously by this point, everyone was streaming everything, which is like cute and fine, because I think it's quite nice that people get a chance to engage in this kind of communion, especially while everyone's isolated. But at the same time, I guess I felt that it was important to mark this much more permanently. I guess I didn't really at the time think about the fact that you can record streams, so don't condemn me for that. But look, it's fine. It worked out well. And then I also because they came to me after having seen a work I did for the Lifted Brow. So it was an essay with dance bites, I suppose, interspersed into it as a kind of cohesive sort of work, blending movement and words. And so I suggested that we do something similar where we have a permanent video of a dance and a permanent essay that could accompany the dance, so that it was this kind of much more involved, much more enriched, I guess, experience and understanding of what it is that I'm trying to convey. So I guess that was your other question, right? What was I trying to...
Yeah, but to pick up on that, you're so right about the enriched experience, because for me, I connect with I work in lots of different ways. Mm-hmm. And it was so brilliant having that visual element and then being able to read the essay, pulling apart the concepts a bit. Mm-hmm. I loved that combination of forms. But for people who haven't had a chance to look at it yet, what are some of the key concepts?
So the key concept, the whole thing was commissioned while we were all at the height of lockdown. Mm-hmm. So in the spirit of Life Interrupted, what I really wanted to convey, the whole thing came from this one phrase to me, which was, how do I combat inertia? And so the idea of inertia is something that's very important to me, not only because I am a dancer, but also in terms of the way we conceive of how we interface with the world. Oh my God, should I turn off my emails? Sorry, that was just
so fun.
Email. Forever working. This idea of inertia kind of permeates a lot of the stuff, a lot of the ways we think about life and how we engage with life, that interface, in that we love as humans to find security and safety in especially concepts, or we get us a mindset to a certain way of doing things, a certain routine, and it even expands to more expansive, more influential things like the politics we believe in, or like what kind of morality we subscribe to. So inertia, for those who have completely forgotten year 9 science, is the first law of motion. It's part of the first law of motion as defined by Isaac Newton. And inertia doesn't actually technically just mean being at rest, like not moving. It also means like moving in a specific way, but without anything resisting that, you just move in the same way. So both of them are about, I guess, if you translate that on human terms or like societal terms, it's this idea of complacency, of sameness, of being stuck in something and not really challenging that. The reason I added the other laws of motion as I developed the work is that inertia can be resisted and combated, and direction can be changed by certain forces. In our case, that force obviously was the fact that we were locked at home now and we couldn't go out. That completely altered our relationship with ourselves, with other people, but also our relationship to concepts and how we could act on them, I guess. So that's where it all expanded. So it's inertia, isolation, and confinement, and I guess the ways we could extract our versions of mobility through, or in response to that circumstance that we never expected, really. We can go into this later, but as I was working on this, the protests also happened, and for Black Lives Matter. And of course, as someone not of that background, it was ridiculous of me to not incorporate that into what I was writing about, given the politicized bent of my piece anyway. And so that was quite hard to delve into. But the idea eventually that came to me was that both the protests and the pandemic, and even the bushfires before them, and all the other climate-related catastrophes that we're dealing with now, they're all linked in the sense that they encroach on our agency, our ability to move, and our ability to act. And so all of that stuff is woven into the piece, whether in the movement side or the word side of it.
Yeah. And you've led me very neatly to what I wanted to speak to you about next. And you've just touched on these. There's a bit in your essay which I really love, where you speak about these three forces of the three major events that have really defined this moment for us so far, which is coming from the fires at the end of last year and the start of this year into the pandemic, and then with the eruption of the Black Lives Matter movement, again in America, and also with in regards to Aboriginal peoples here in Australia. And you've said that these are three forces to be reckoned with: one environmental, one epidemiological, and one ethical. And I just love the way you summed that up. And that leads me to my next question, which involves another quotation. I love quoting, which is from your essay. It says, "Perhaps we can consider Black Lives Matter protesters defying lockdown mandates as performers of their own type of subversive dance." Now, I'd love for you to speak about the relationship between body and space and what it means to exist and to dance in public spaces.
Sure. So I think before I get into this, we really need to pause and think about what actually constitutes dance. And if the popular or the superficial understanding of dance is that it's choreography to, music. It's kind of like a subsequent thing to another art form. Or even if it's your primary art form, there's this kind of formulaic quality to it. There you write the choreography, you rehearse the choreography, you perform the choreography. But deep down, dance is about ownership of bodies and physicality and acting on a space. Those are kind of, like, to me anyway, that's how I define dance. And so in the context of the protests, we really then need to think about what we conceive of as space and what does that mean. And so while we, again, superficially or, on an everyday level understand what space is, these are the things that we move through, these are the things we enter and exit. Space is constructed, planes exist, planes from what it is now, like year 10 maths, maybe year 7 maths. So plane is the things that on which reality exists. But space is defined, and spaces are also policed based on those definitions. The definitions come from us. So we say, this is my lounge room. And this is, especially if it's an open plan house like mine, this is my lounge room, this is my kitchen, this is my dining area. But also they expand to things like countries and borders. So the idea of, during lockdown, protesters being told, you cannot enter this space, this is a space that is barred from you, was really peculiar to me, because the CBD is a public space. It is defined as a public space, which means space for the public. So if the public deems it useful to use that space for that reason, then why are governments preventing them from doing so? So that's that side of it. The subversion element comes, it's not my idea, it's from one of the theorists I refer to, André Lepecki. And the idea is that because dance is a mode of expression or a mode of being that, I guess, challenges our normal interactions with the world, like it's not based on logic, it's not based on like hierarchies and definitions. It's, one movement is totally different in another movement, even if ostensibly it's like an arm wave or whatever. And so inherently that makes dance subversive. So taking all of that together, oh my God, I'm so extra. Like, why are you even interviewing me? Gosh, this is why I'm not allowed to be a parent.
You're brilliant. You're brilliant. Keep going.
So complex. Yeah. So taken together, the idea for me is that there is a choreographic quality to, coordinated movement and ownership of that space in protest. There's a rhythmic quality to like marching together. There's a timing to it. People understand intuitively how much space they need, especially, with the distancing requirements. But also, even if it wasn't, if you look at those videos of protests from the 60s, the civil rights movement, there is a pattern there. And this is sounding really ridiculous, but this is just how I think. So just gonna have to deal. There is a pattern there. There is a choreographic quality to that movement, that ownership of that space. And so, yeah, I felt that was a beautiful way to tie everything together. Especially at that point where I was like, I don't want to sound like I'm speaking for Aboriginal and African American peoples. I don't know what it must be like for them. I haven't lived through the things that they have. But what I can do is give a lens through which, people like me, and obviously like white people as well, can engage with these issues in a different way.
And as you were navigating all of the various things that come together in this piece, were there any hurdles that you had to confront, either emotional hurdles or conceptual hurdles or logistic hurdles when developing in either of the two aspects, the video or the essay?
Mm-hmm. The essay was probably just the word count. I went over the commissioned word count, but I always do. So I feel like that's my signature. Never commission me. If you're going to commission me, advertising, plug in myself, give me a lower word count, because I will inevitably ask for a higher one. But
I can absolutely relate. Once you get started on a concept, it's really hard to rein that in.
Well, you don't want to simplify it, especially for something like this. You just cannot simplify it, and you also can't decontextualize it. So everything has to be spelled out.
I read something the other day that was talking about not breaking rules, but about expanding rules. So you weren't breaking the word count; you were just expanding the word count.
I love this subversive dance that you're doing. I very much appreciate it. Well, yeah, so there was the word count. Obviously, there was the political and almost ethical dilemma that I had about being very careful about how to not speak for other people, which I hope in some way I've addressed by, twisting the brief. The brief was not about the protest. I mean, it could not have been, because the brief predated the events. But I was days out from my deadline, and I changed so much of that essay. The original essay was actually quite self-indulgent, talking about how I am so proud of myself for dancing despite, it was just so irritating, and it would have been completely tone deaf to publish that piece. I'm glad that I didn't do that. So those two. The other one would have just been making space, like in my house. I normally, because I've been dancing through a lockdown, taking digital virtual classes and stuff, and I would pop my phone on selfie mode, facing that way, so like behind me, and so I was conscious that I didn't want people to think I just made another like dance film from a class. So I had to think about what direction, like how to change the orientation of the video, and yeah, the best way was to do it against the window, which is where the whole dancing against the landscape idea, which you'll read about if you have the patience to read my essay, came from. So I had to move everything out of the way. There's a couch here, you can't see, but there's a couch to my left, there's a TV, there's like other armchairs. They all had to move. And yeah, but look, I'm an artist, and I'm aware that, logistics and constraints are just things you work with. So I wouldn't even really consider them hurdles. They were just, prompts for me to respond to, for me to do work better, like more engagingly, more compellingly. So yeah.
I thought that worked really well, actually, the dancing with the city in the background, because then you can't help but think about the particular context we're living in. And you speak to that really beautifully in the essay. There was I'm going to butcher it because I'm not reading it, so excuse my terrible paraphrasing.
All good.
But you talked a lot about how interesting it is living through a time where we're instantly aware we're living through a significant time in history. And that's something that I think everyone has been grappling with, but obviously something that a lot of artists are responding to, because it's not often that you're living in a time and realizing that this is a time that generations in the future will learn about as being a huge pivot in the way society functions and thinks.
Yep.
So having that backdrop of Melbourne in the background did such a good job of reminding us where we are and that things are changing.
Thank you.
We've just had a question come through on the chat. Oh, this is lovely. Adolfo is extremely eloquent and thoughtful.
Oh my God, this is probably someone I know.
Hey, take it.
Who said this? I will hunt you down.
It's like, hey, Mom. But then there's a question. How can we break out of the inertia we're stuck in right now?
I would entreat you to begin with inertia. So in that other piece that I mentioned for the lifted brow, which is called Sitting in the Movement, which, just quick synopsis, details my relationship with my various mental illnesses. And one of the things I had to grapple with is this ability to be patient and to not try to deflect or to deny or to even fix sometimes immediately any negative emotions that I was feeling, which included, I have a short temper, I snap at people, that kind of stuff. So the idea of sitting in the movement is you let that feeling permeate you and wash through you, and then you can act in response to that. But the point is that you confronted it, you welcomed it into that moment. So that's the first thing I would say with the inertia stuff is, do you actually grasp what it is that you're in right now? Which is what this piece was for me. I needed to understand what was happening. I just returned from Manila, and all this happened. It was ridiculous. And it was dizzying to even comprehend the gravity and the speed with which everything just changed. So it was only after really sitting with it that I was able to recalibrate and find my bearings to figure out what I can do. From that point, once you have an authentic urge to change or do something differently, then you can think about what I can do. So, I mean, this feels very Oprah, but I guess you could consider starting small and thinking about what changes you'd like to make with yourself to your routine, maybe like one aspect of yourself that you'd like to improve. You could go immediate interpersonal and think about what kind of loved one you want to be, what kind of colleague you want to be. Actually, you know what? I'm going to refer to a cheat sheet. If you go to the end of my piece, there is a graphic that I linked to that I found on Twitter, which asks, who do I want to be during COVID-19? That is actually a list of questions that is step 2 of my little inertia plan. So number 1, accept, comprehend, grasp the inertia, develop an authentic desire to action it, and then to ask one of those questions in COVID. And you know what? If you want to just start with something humble and personal, that's fine. Given the current climate, I think it would be ideal if you went outside of yourself and tried to contribute in some way to combating injustice. But there are also degrees of that. You could start small and start by educating yourself about what colorism is, for example, what true allyship is. Yeah, anyway.
Oh, great answer. Now, next, what do you hope that people will take away from the interaction with this work with Mod, especially the blend of the two mediums?
I think probably the simple, I need to be more concise with my answers.
No.
That is just to entertain a different understanding of what it means to communicate and to express. So my background is in writing. I did dance in my youth, in my childhood, before I migrated to Australia. And then when I first came here, obviously it was like really overwhelming. I was 15, so I just couldn't get into dance. So I just focused on my studies, whatever. And throughout that time, obviously I was working on my writing career and my editing career. And it was only when I was 25 that I rekindled my love for dance again. And it was just incredibly liberating to find a different modality, to be able to confront things and express things in a way that wasn't just about rigidity, or it wasn't about logic or argument. It was just about free expression. And when you find this kind of connection to 3D space, because obviously writing is very much 2D, and when we talk to people, I'm probably butchering physics right now. It feels quite 2D to talk to someone, in the sense that there are like two axes. There's the time. Anyway, you get a really good sense of where you fit in the grander scheme of things, because to dance is to understand where you are, like when you're stationary. So that's probably something I definitely want. It's not, obviously, apart from the actual message of the work, the thematic elements of it. From a formal perspective, I guess, from an aesthetic perspective, that's my challenge, is to, yeah.
It reminds me a little bit of, I think, some things that Rebecca Solnit, the essayist, has said about moving with the body as being the only way to really move the body and the mind through the world and through space. And it just came to mind as you were saying that last bit.
I mean, we'll do another Q&A about this, but yeah, Plato has a lot to answer for. Plato and his obsession with the mind and his demonization of the body, which obviously was inherited by Christianity. But yeah, no, go Aristotle. Like the body and physicality and connection to physical space is so important. Materiality is so important.
We would love to know what you are going to be working on in the next little while, if there's any particular works or research or ideas you're going to explore in the near future.
I am forever working. So yes, there are probably 7 billion things. I am currently working on an essay for Meanjin, the literary journal, on the notion of optics and how it's become quite de rigueur in the current climate, obviously because we're all at home and we want to feel like we're contributing to all of the stuff that's going on. We're constantly, I guess, opting for performative ways of showing our support, which can be good or bad, but more in my essay, which comes out in September in the print issue. A bit of a plug as well, I have a monthly column for Liminal, and the next one I think comes out on Thursday. So there'll be 3 little recommendations there for things you can stream in this time. / my day job. Yeah.
Brilliant. So if people are interested in finding out more about your work, where's a good starting point, do you think?
Thankfully for you, here's one I prepared earlier. I have a website.
Perfect.
So it's just www.adolfoaranjuez.com, and they're organized into tabs. You can find out about my editing work, or my writing work, or my performance work, or all of my other work. Yeah. Otherwise, a quick Google. I'm the only Adolfo in Melbourne, possibly Australia. There are others. I will also hunt you down. So that's, yeah.
And I got to say, it's very inspiring to hear that you went re-engaged with dance at around the age of 25, because there's such a story around dance of having to have committed to it since you were 3 years old, and I really love hearing about artists who have revisited work at a later stage and found how it sits in their body then. So I'm hoping that there are people watching who are like, oh, maybe I'll go back to the dance studio.
I highly recommend going back into the studio regardless of whether you want to be semi-professional or if you danced before. It's just really good for you psychologically. Read more in that Lift to Brow piece. But for me, yeah, it was quite fascinating entering beginner classes again, because obviously I hadn't done it for a while. And the first class that I went to, the teacher pulled me aside at the end and said, number 1, you are not a beginner. And number 2, you've had jazz training. To which I was like, no, I do not. I hate jazz dance. I'm sorry. It's a foundational genre. Sorry, no disrespect. It's important. But I hate how it looks. It's just so peppy. But I did have a cheerleading background, and there are resonances between the two types of, like very sharp, poppy movements. So I was like, okay, Bish, you know stuff. Sorry, I said Bish. It's not a sweat. Yeah. So, but no, please do. Like, I recommend it. It'll be so good for you. You'll feel a sense of mastery over yourself that you might not have felt before. It's very empowering.
Absolutely. I know for me, I'm so uncoordinated, but I love being in group classes. I think because I'm not very good at it, I have to concentrate really hard. So it slows my brain down, and focusing on physicality and movement is such a nice way of processing different thoughts and ideas. And obviously you've taken that completely to the next level by accompanying it with your work and then the essay as well. Definitely, if people haven't watched it yet or read it, go and check it out. You are in for a treat.
Yeah. Thank you for saying.
Well, thank you for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure to chat over the last half hour with us.
No, thanks for having me. It's been an honor. And thank you to Maud as well for commissioning my work in the first place. I hope you viewers, whoever you are, wherever you are, can enjoy it and take something from it, and do connect with me if you would like to.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you again.